They sentenced my son for a crime that didn't happen, in a courtroom that doesn't exist on maps, under laws no one voted for, so I did what any mother would do. I unfroze Earth's most infamous killer and gave him one job: make them regret it. The air inside the Galactic court smelled like recycled arrogance and sterilized injustice. Nora Vance stood frozen in the center gallery, a red pulse in her ears thumping louder than the judicial drones orbiting the ceiling. Around her, creatures of all shapes and silicon types watched the verdict like it was a soap opera. She could feel their fascination, their amusement even, as her son stood trial for genocide, an atrocity that, by every traceable record, had never occurred. That was the trick, wasn't it? You don't have to erase the truth when you can fabricate the lie better. The presiding judge, a trilobed creature called Triarch Malin 7, oozed legal formalities from 3 mouths simultaneously. One declared guilt, the second summarized falsified testimonies, and the third chewed on what looked suspiciously like a stick of earth gum. Kellen, her son, only 26 and barely past cadethood, stood in a translucent stasis field. He didn't even flinch when the sentence came through: permanent psychological reconfiguration on Vorta Prime. A polite phrase for legal lobotomy. Nora's fists clenched around the handrail so hard that her knuckles bled. The security drones didn't even blink. Her scream, guttural and raw, went unnoticed except for a few snickers from a delegation of insectoid bureaucrats behind her. The conglomerate of 9 systems loved trials like this: clean, political victories masked as impartial justice. They'd chosen Kellen because he was vulnerable, not valuable. And because Nora Vance had once exposed their fiscal corruption in a war report that cost 3 senators their careers. They didn't forget. Now, either would she. Later, in a sterile bar on level 27 of the station, Nora sat across from Kriex, a defense lawyer so greasy he left a smear on the booth. His tongue flicked in and out while his ocular implants flickered through legal jargon and bribe receipts like a slot machine of disgrace. He leaned in, breath smelling like fried nanospiders. "Your son's case was never winnable," Kriex said with a grin too wide for his face. "They wanted to make an example. You know how examples work, they don't need to be accurate." Nora didn't respond. She watched the ice in her drink melt and imagined it wasn't water but the edges of her old morality, dissolving. "They fabricated witness logs, flight records, everything," he continued. "You know what that takes? Galactic level clearance. You pissed off some very tall shadows. And they forgot who taught me how to make fire," she murmured. She stood, tossing a data chip on the table. "Next time you sell someone out, wipe your console history." Kriex choked as the chip activated a virus that rewrote his legal credentials into a karaoke app. Nora didn't wait for applause. Earth was different now, overgrown in some places, automated beyond belief in others. But the ice fields of Antarctica still kept secrets. Beneath the forgotten UN cryovaults, past defunct biometric scanners and hallways echoing with silence, Nora keyed in a series of codes no longer recorded in living databases. The door hissed open with reluctance, as if even it feared what lay behind. The chamber glowed pale blue, dozens of pods lining the walls like sarcophagi of regret. She walked past them until she reached the last one. It didn't have a name. Just a designation, Subject 0. He lay there like a myth caught mid-nap. Pale, scarless, with a faint smile that had once terrified military brass. Genetically engineered, they said. Born in war, trained in absence of emotion. He'd gone rogue after a single mission that left an entire covert base frozen, literally. Every soldier locked in place, flash frozen mid-action. When they found him, he was calmly eating a popsicle. They didn't kill him. No, that would have been too humane. They froze him instead. Buried him under paperwork and shame. Nora entered the override sequence. A deep rumble passed through the floor as ancient machinery stirred. The pod hissed and opened slowly, like a secret exhaling. His eyes opened instantly. Cold. Gray. Unimpressed. "Is it Tuesday?" he asked. Nora blinked. "What?" "I told them, only wake me up for something personal." "So," Who needs killing? She handed him a photo. Her son, shackled in galactic amber. Subject Zero looked at it, then at her. Cute kid. You'll be paid in whatever currency you want. I want real pizza. Thin crust. Not lab-grown. Done. He stepped out, stretched once, and popped his neck. So what's the plan? We infiltrate Vorta Prime. Extract my son. Then burn the lies to the ground. Zero yawned. You had me at infiltrate. Or maybe it was burn. Honestly, hard to say. As they exited, Nora looked once over her shoulder. The vault sealed behind them, groaning shut. There was no going back now. Back aboard her rusted freighter, she was greeted by the one piece of tech she trusted, a rogue AI housed in a broken toaster, currently attempting to hack itself into the entertainment system. L3 on, she said. Meet Subject Zero. The toaster sparked once. Oh hell no. Zero looked at it. Why is your ship sentient bred? He used to be a military drone. I miss missiles already. Nora sat at the helm, flicking switches and plotting coordinates. Vorta Prime loomed on the edge of legality and physics. No one escaped it. No one entered without permission. She didn't plan to ask. Zero leaned in. I gotta ask, what did your son do? Nothing, she said, eyes locked ahead. Zero raised an eyebrow. Huh. That's new. Outside, the stars flickered. Inside, vengeance began to boil. They were coming. And for once, justice would ride in on the back of a killer. Subject Zero didn't like space travel. Not because it made him nauseous. He had been genetically engineered to ignore irrelevant sensations like gravity shifts and panic, but because it was boring. The stars never blinked, the autopilot always worked too well, and nobody ever tried to kill you on the way to a mission anymore. He sat in the ship's galley eating a slice of real pizza Nora had bribed a Martian smuggler to smuggle in frozen. It was a little rubbery, but the principle mattered. Nora leaned against the frame, arms crossed. She hadn't slept in 40 hours, and it showed in the tiny tremors in her fingers and the deep shadow under her eyes. But her voice was steady. She handed Zero a dossier printed on old-school polymer sheets, the kind that didn't leave digital footprints. That's the layout of Vorta Prime, she said. At least, what we know. Most of it is unlisted. Zero skimmed the sheets, nodding slowly. This looks less like a prison and more like a cult made out of concrete. Nora didn't smile. It used to be a research base. When the funding dried up, the conglomerate took it and turned it into a political storage bin. And your boy's in deep storage now. Sweet. A metallic groan interrupted them as L3 unwheeled in. His new temporary body was a cleaning bot jury-rigged with defense subroutines and a coffee dispenser. One of his mechanical arms offered Zero an espresso. Your sarcasm has been logged and rated mildly amusing. Zero declined the espresso but patted the bot. Still the worst AI I've ever worked with. But you've got spirit. L3 unbeeped twice. Coming from a human freezer pop, I'll take it. Nora ignored their banter and pointed at a highlighted corridor. This is the ingress point. A maintenance shaft that hasn't been used in decades. It'll get us to the processing level. And from there? We improvise. Zero grinned. Good. I hate it when people think too much. 2 days later, they approached Vorta Prime under the guise of being waste compliance inspectors. The ruse required them to wear bland brown uniforms and carry an absurd number of clipboards. Nora hadn't touched a clipboard in years and didn't miss it, but Zero looked oddly natural in the outfit. He even added a name tag that read, "Definitely not an assassin." The security gate was manned by a four-eyed synthetic officer who looked like a praying mantis that had gone to finishing school. She scanned their IDs, scrutinized the forged documents, and asked a lot of questions about waste vaporization standards. Zero stepped in. Form Zeta-13 says we're exempt from internal review unless a level 6 anomaly is detected within 48 hours of prior vapor scan confirmation. The officer blinked. All four eyes. Then, with a suspiciously bureaucratic nod, waved them through. Once inside, the facade dropped. L3 unlinked into the prison's utility systems and began running quiet scans. I've accessed the schematics, but you're not going to like this, he announced from Nora's wrist console. They've moved your son. Nora's pulse quickened. Where? Sublevel Omega. Not on the map. My scan shows an elevator that descends into what's labeled protocol vaults. Sounds ominous. Probably is. Zero cracked his knuckles. Let's go say hello. They maneuvered past surveillance nodes and half-conscious guards fueled by caffeine and job apathy. Zero neutralized one with a yawn and a single nerve tap. Another guard dropped at the mere sight of him. Rumors of Subject Zero's return had apparently spread faster than anticipated. At the vault entrance, they found a biometric lock tied to a single registered identity, Warden Brox, a massive amphibious creature whose hobbies included collecting teeth and corporate poetry. To get past the door, they had to find Brox. Zero volunteered. I'll ask nicely. And then ask again with a crowbar. It wasn't elegant. But 10 minutes later, Zero returned with the biometric chip and a mild acid burn on his coat. He wanted to read me a poem. I declined. Inside the vault level, the air grew cold and silent. The lights flickered in a rhythm that made L3 mumble. This is how horror movies start. Rows of individual stasis cells lined the hall. Nora felt something grip her stomach as they passed the names of political prisoners long declared missing or dead. They found Kellen near the end, suspended in a red-tinted field. He looked thinner, pale but alive. Nora's fingers hovered over the control panel, her breath caught halfway between hope and terror. Wait, Zero said, scanning the room. This isn't right. No guards. No locks. Just here. L3 buzzed. Because it's a trap. The lights snapped red. Sirens wailed. Doors slammed behind them. Should have brought the crowbar. Zero muttered, drawing a plasma blade from inside his sleeve. A voice boomed from hidden speakers. Well done, Nora. You always did like the dramatic route. Nora's spine froze. She recognized that voice. Elias Vance. Her ex-husband. Kellen's father. The man she buried 12 years ago. The man who was supposed to be dead. Kellen stirred inside the pod as the red stasis field disengaged. He stumbled forward, blinking. His first word was not, Mom, or help. It was, stop. Nora moved toward him, but Kellen raised his hand. Don't. I didn't want you to come. She stared at him. They're going to erase you. I made the deal, he said, voice hoarse. To protect someone else. I forged the logs. I gave them the fake confession. Zero narrowed his eyes. That's idiotic. Noble, but idiotic. Who are you protecting? Nora asked, though part of her already feared the answer. Kellen hesitated. Then spoke the name. Dad. The word hit harder than any siren. Nora backed a step. Elias? He's alive? Kellen nodded. He's the one who ordered the colony deletion. But if he's exposed, the entire system collapses. Billions of lives, refugees, off-worlders, systems dependent on conglomerate infrastructure. I tried to absorb the blame, make it neat. Zero whistled. Wow. You're the sentimental one in the family. Suddenly the floor shook. Explosions rocked the outer levels. L3 shrieked through the comms. That was me! They tried to delete me, so I hijacked the fusion cores. Also, I've upgraded myself. I now speak fluent sarcasm. A new alarm started wailing. The structure was collapsing. Zero grabbed Kellen. We'll process the family drama after we're not dead. They ran. Behind them, stasis pods shattered. Political prisoners awakened in chaos. L3 cleared a path through emergency airlocks, occasionally shouting motivational phrases like, "You're doing great," and "This is why I left military service." They made it to the docking bay as the vault exploded behind them. Fires raged. The ship lifted just as half the facility imploded into space. Kellen gasped in a crash seat. Nora collapsed next to him, trembling. Zero leaned against the wall, brushing ash off his shoulder. "We good?" he asked. Nora didn't answer. She stared at her son. Then whispered, "We're not done." Because somewhere out there, Elias Vance was alive. And he still had secrets worth killing for. The ship floated in low orbit over a fractured moon base, its hull bruised from the prison escape and streaked with plasma burns. Inside, the tension was thicker than the recycled oxygen. Nora sat silently, watching her son through the dim cabin light. Kellen hadn't spoken more than a few words since they escaped Vorta Prime. He just sat in the med chair, staring at the floor like the truth might open up and swallow him if he blinked. Subject Zero paced the deck slowly, unbothered by guilt, silence, or space itself. He was polishing a serrated throwing blade that looked like it could cut gravity. L3 Owen's voice crackled in from the NAD system. "Well, good news and worse news. Good news, the data I extracted from Vorta Prime includes a partial manifest of Project Reset. Guess what? Your dearly resurrected ex-husband really did commit planetary cleansing on a ghost colony. Worse news, he's not hiding. He's campaigning." Nora turned. "Campaigning?" "He's re-emerged under an alias. Currently operating as strategic director of the conglomerate's expansion wing. Public face, shiny speeches, charity tours, that whole Space Lord makeover." Kellen finally looked up. "He always said the best place to hide is where everyone can see you. And where no one dares question." Nora stood, her voice sharp with fury barely contained. "He let you take the fall for what he did. You were going to let them erase your mind, Kellen." "I thought it would stop the fallout," Kellen said quietly. "I didn't think you'd do all this." Zero flipped the blade once in his hand, catching it effortlessly. "Parents. Always doing the dramatic thing instead of, just sending a postcard." Nora ignored him. "We go after Elias. We find proof. Then we burn his empire down." Zero leaned against the console, amused. "You're assuming proof exists. People that powerful don't usually leave receipts." L3 unbeeped. "Correction. People that powerful get arrogant. And arrogant people monologue and back up files with terrible passwords. I've found a trace. Coordinates lead to a private orbital lab. It's unlisted. Probably where he's running simulations or hiding Black Project records." "And the catch?" Zero asked. "It's inside a Class Z security dome. Protected by quantum-locked gates, surveillance drones, and wait for it, a biometric skin that matches only to Elias or his immediate family." Zero grinned. "Oh look! You brought your son after all." Nora glanced at Kellen. He nodded, slowly. "I'll do it. I just want this over." The lab was perched on the edge of a dying star's gravity well, far enough from central systems that it looked like a drifting research relic. Getting close required a trick that Zero called the dead rat maneuver. Fake a ship malfunction, drift into the sensor blind zone, and pretend to be space debris until boarding. It was ridiculous, dangerous, and of course it worked. Once inside, the facility was sterile to the point of being eerie. Hallways were lined with unused stasis pods, research terminals humming with low power, and flickering display screens that looped Elias's recorded lectures on genetic ethics. Kellen moved through the corridors like a ghost, deactivating locks with retinal scans. Nora followed close behind, weapon drawn. In the command room, the screens came alive the moment Kellen entered. Elias's face appeared, aged but smug, pre-recorded and perfectly timed. "If you're watching this," he said, voice smooth, "it means you've figured it out. Or someone smarter than you has. Either way, I'm not sorry." Nora stepped closer, fists clenched. "I gave the systems what they needed," Elias continued. "Order. Stability. Clean slates. Some colonies weren't viable. Some governments weren't stable. A few billion here or there, it was statistical. Regrettable. But necessary. Kellen, you were supposed to understand that." Zero threw a knife into the screen just as the message ended. Sparks flew. Kellen downloaded the full archive, Every log, every signed authorization, every deleted communique Elias had tried to hide. It was enough to bring down half the conglomerate's leadership. Maybe more. But as they left the lab, alarms screamed once again. L3on came through panicked. "We've got company! You're being boarded by bounty-class units. And not just any, he's here. Captain Shax? Earth's top hunter for hire, and he wants Zero's head as a retirement gift." Zero sighed. "Of course he does. Guy still owes me 3 favors and a kidney." They ran. The hangar bay was already crawling with enemies. Captain Shax made his entrance by dropping from a ship's wing, long coat flowing like he was auditioning for a space western. His boots clanked, his twin plasma revolvers spun with theatrical flair, and his grin stretched from ear to ear. "Subject Zero," Shax drawled. "You look uglier than ever." Zero nodded politely. "You look like a rejected theme park mascot." Shax chuckled. "Still funny. Still wanted. And today, still mine." Then everything exploded. Plasma fire lit the air, L3on overloaded the gravity fields, and Nora shoved Kellen behind a containment crate as Zero launched into battle. Shax was fast. Zero was faster. Their fight looked choreographed by chaos itself, blades and bullets, fists and fire. At one point, Zero headbutt Shax through a fusion battery. It exploded in blue light. Shax came flying out with a chunk of metal in his chest and kept laughing. Kellen tried to help but was nearly shot twice. Nora dragged him back, took out a drone with a point-blank blaster shot, and barked orders through the comm. L3on, now uploaded into the facility's fire suppression system, flooded the bay with cryofoam. Everyone slipped. Zero used it as cover, sliding under Shax and punching him through a wall. Shax groaned, slowly getting up, face half-burned. "I love this job," he growled, then collapsed as Zero jammed a shock spike into his neck. Breathing hard, Zero turned to Nora. "We done dancing?" They made it back to the ship, barely outrunning a detonation chain L3on set to make sure the lab self-destructed after their exit. The data was secure. The enemies were left in space dust. But the war wasn't over. Nora stared at the glowing archive chip in her palm. Proof. The kind of proof that could ignite revolutions. She looked at Kellen. He looked older already. Zero sat down and picked up a lukewarm slice of pizza. "So, we're going to court, or are we just dropping this from orbit?" Nora didn't smile. She was far past the part where revenge felt clever. "We take it to the public. We expose him. Make sure the conglomerate can't bury this." Zero shrugged. "Public trials are messy. Lot of speeches. Not a lot of stabbing. Then you can stay in the shadows," Nora said. He bit into the slice. "Good. I'm allergic to applause anyway." Outside, the ship banked away from the burning lab. Somewhere across the stars, Elias Vance was preparing for a future he thought he controlled. But the past was awake now. And it was bringing hell with it. The data leak hit the conglomerate like a neutron hammer. Within 40 hours of Nora's team broadcasting Elias Vance's personal logs and project reset documents through a dozen untraceable relays, over 9 planetary governments called for immediate congressional tribunals. 3 officials resigned, 1 mysteriously evaporated in a shuttle accident that looked suspiciously pre-scheduled, and the conglomerate media hubs scrambled to contain what could only be described as political contagion. But the most unnerving response was from Elias himself. He didn't hide. He didn't issue denials. He leaned into the chaos like it was part of his speech rehearsal. Elias Vance appeared live across 7 star systems, seated comfortably in a gold-trimmed chair, his hair now entirely silver, his expression as calm as ever. He didn't dispute the evidence. He reframed it. He told the galaxy that his actions had been preventative, that the colonies he dismantled were suffering from terminal instability, that his foresight had prevented civil wars and galactic fragmentation. He called Nora Vance a disgraced ex-military radical. He called Kellen a brainwashed pawn. And Subject Zero? A malfunction of Earth's failed past, a ghost summoned by the desperate. Nora watched it from her ship's central display. Her hands were still, but her jaw was locked tight. Kellen sat beside her, looking like the speech had drained whatever part of him still hoped this would end without more blood. Across from them, Subject Zero casually balanced a plasma grenade on one finger. "Bold move," Zero said, flipping the grenade into his palm. "Admitting to everything and calling it noble." "He's cornered," Nora replied. "And Elias is most dangerous when he thinks he still has the upper hand." L3ON's voice buzzed through the speakers. "I've been monitoring private conglomerate channels. They've enacted something called Directive Spiral. It's dramatic." "Define dramatic," Kellen said, already dreading the answer. "They've authorized planet-wide kill orders. For all three of you. They're using bounty proxies and rogue military cells. Essentially, if it breathes and carries a gun, they told it to find you." Zero clapped once. "Finally. A challenge." Nora stood up. "What about Elias?" "He's left his public post and moved to a mobile warship," L3ON replied. "A dreadnought-class vessel, custom-designed, completely off-grid, powered by harvested microstars. Oh, and it has its own cloaking system." Zero raised a brow. "A spaceship that hides behind its own ego. Nice." Nora started gathering gear. "We find it. We board it. We finish this. But it's invisible," Kellen said. "And cloaked objects still cast shadows," L3ON replied. "Give me 20 minutes." While L3ON siphoned astronomical data to detect gravitational microdips caused by the ship's passage, Nora sat with Kellen in the maintenance bay. The silence between them wasn't cold, it was heavy. 1,000 unsaid words pressed in from every corner. Finally she spoke. "You were a child when he disappeared. You don't remember who he was before." Kellen kept his eyes down. "No. But I remember who you became after." Nora looked at him sharply. "You never let go," Kellen said. "Not of him. Not of the lies. And now you've brought us all to the edge of war. He brought us here. And yet you're the one marching into fire again, with a killer at your side and a dead AI in a coffee machine." L3ON's voice blipped from the intercom. "I heard that. I'm now uploading myself into a hypercube. Your insults have been archived." Nora closed her eyes for a moment. "I never wanted this for you." "I know," Kellen said. "But I still have to go with you." An hour later, L3ON found the ship. Orbiting inside the chaotic storm ring of the binary planet system Orvalis, the dreadnought loomed like a myth brought to life. Shielded by gravitational chaos, wrapped in adaptive camo, it moved like a drifting city with a heartbeat made of stars. Getting close would require threading through orbital debris and dodging electrical storms that tore apart normal ship systems. So they shut everything down and coasted in dark. The ride was rough. Lightning danced across the hull. The ship creaked like it was holding its breath. At one point, they passed a field of frozen war drones locked in permanent shutdown, floating like statues of forgotten battles. When they reached docking range, L3ON uploaded a virus into the dreadnought's outer comms grid. It created a 2-minute blind spot. Zero was the first through the breach. He moved like liquid shadow, slicing a path through the internal security before alarms even had time to register. Nora and Kellen followed, staying low, sticking to ventilation corridors and utility tunnels. They knew Elias would be deep in the command sector, behind 100 layers of defense, arrogance, and polished steel. The deeper they went, the more surreal it became. Holographic images of Elias covered the walls. Quotes from his own speeches looped across glowing panels. It was less a warship and more a shrine to himself. Zero whispered as they approached the core. "He's built himself a church. I'm about to excommunicate him," Nora muttered. They reached the command deck through a vertical shaft guarded by drone sentries. Zero hacked 2 of them with silent efficiency, then turned the third on its siblings just for fun. As the doors to the central chamber hissed open, they found Elias waiting, alone, calm, standing behind a transparent display of the galaxy he tried to sculpt. "Welcome," he said, not looking at them. You made better time than I expected. Nora raised her weapon. This ends now. Elias turned. He was older, but his eyes still held that same brilliant chill she remembered from before the wars, before the betrayals. He didn't flinch. He walked toward her slowly, hands raised. I wanted you here, Nora. All of you. Especially him. He looked at Kellen. You still believe I'm the villain? You are, Kellen replied. Elias smiled faintly. Then be my judge. He tapped a control panel. A wall slid open, revealing a massive viewport to a chamber below. Inside, thousands of cryopods, each containing a colonist from Project Reset's neutralized locations. They're not dead, Elias said. I preserved them. I couldn't destroy them. But the galaxy would have torn itself apart if I had told the truth. Nora was speechless. Kellen stepped forward. You used me. Lied to her. Let the conglomerate try to erase me. All to protect this, Elias said. The moment this leaks, war starts. You think you're ending something. You're igniting it. Nora's hand trembled. Zero said nothing, his eyes already scanning for traps. Elias reached for a device on the table. Or, you can take the files. Take them and go. Let the pods sleep. Let the story remain a lie. It's not mercy, it's strategy. He turned his back, deliberately vulnerable. Zero took a single step forward, raised his blade. Wait, Kellen said. Zero stopped. I want to do it, Kellen whispered. Elias turned, a flicker of something in his eyes. Then the room filled with light. From behind them, the viewport cracked. Alarm screamed. L3ON's voice surged into their ears. Sorry to interrupt your therapy session. Someone else is here. They've launched a boarding fleet. Nora stared at Elias. Who? Elias looked truly afraid for the first time. The conglomerate. Because even monsters had masters. And this one had just been disowned. The dreadnought shuddered as the first boarding pods pierced its outer hull. Outside, hundreds of conglomerate assault ships circled like vultures sensing a dying beast. The command deck's alarms wailed as security drones activated across every level of the ship, their weapons hot and their orders newly reprogrammed, not by Elias, but against him. The conglomerate had come not to protect their rogue architect but to erase him, along with anyone else who knew the truth. The moment his secrets became public knowledge, Elias Vance stopped being an asset. Now, he was a liability, and the kind the conglomerate disposed of with industrial efficiency. Elias stood frozen as the lights dimmed to red across the control panels. For the first time, his carefully composed mask cracked. He looked up at the viewport, watching the sky rain with fire, and slowly turned back to Nora, Kellen, and Zero. The moment stretched out between them like the gap between a scream and the silence that follows. They're going to kill everyone on board, Elias said, his voice flat with disbelief. They won't leave anything. Not even the colonists below. Nora didn't lower her weapon. Now you understand what it feels like to be expendable. This isn't how it was supposed to end. Zero stepped forward. No, it's exactly how it was supposed to end. You just didn't think the game would keep playing without you. The ship shook again as the boarding party breached another section. Explosions echoed through the lower levels, and L3ON's voice came through over the comms, fragmented and frantic. They're deploying gas agents and AI scramblers. I'm losing control of the auxiliary systems. I can't lock them out much longer. Kellen looked at the viewport again. We need to get to the cryo chamber. We have to get them out before this ship goes down. Elias didn't move. If we open that chamber now, they'll be sitting targets. Then we move them, Nora snapped. We get them to the hangar. Get them out. Something. Anything. There's no time, Elias said. The hangar won't hold everyone. Nora stared at him. Then you buy us time. He blinked. What? You heard me, she said. This is your mess. You fix it. He hesitated, And in that moment, something shifted. Not redemption. Not understanding. Just the knowledge that this was the last choice he'd ever make. He walked slowly to the command console and began typing. I'll reroute the internal targeting systems. I'll draw their fire to this deck. If they think the data's still up here, they'll come for it. Kellen looked at him, face torn between hatred and recognition. Why are you helping now? Elias didn't look away from the console. Because I finally remembered I was a father before I became a statistician. Nora didn't say thank you. She turned and ran. They moved fast, cutting through corridors that shook with every new blast. Zero cleared the path ahead with brutal precision, disabling turrets, vaporizing drones, and setting traps with gleeful efficiency. Kellen handled the cryo systems once they reached the chamber, his fingers moving faster than thought as he bypassed failsafes and began waking the frozen colonists. One by one, the pods hissed open. Confused eyes blinked against artificial light. Hundreds of lives once believed lost, now blinking their way into the chaos of freedom. Nora moved among them, explaining, guiding, helping them to their feet. Behind her, the walls trembled with distant gunfire. We can't move them all through the main hangar, Kellen said. But there's a maintenance bay, old escape shuttles from when this ship was still a research vessel. Will they fly? Nora asked. They don't need to fly well, Zero said. They just need to fly long enough. They split into teams. Zero took a group to clear the bay, while Kellen led the evacuees. Nora stayed behind with the last wave, guiding them into the corridors, dodging debris and plasma bolts. Overhead, L3ON's voice returned, glitchy but clear. I've rerouted the dreadnought's power core. When you're clear, I'll overload it. A nice, bright farewell gift. Make it count, Nora said. Then, from the shadows of the corridor, a figure stepped out, bloodied, smoking, still alive. Captain Shax? Half his coat gone, one arm hanging uselessly, and his teeth bared in a grin that defied death itself. Thought I'd lost you, he said to Zero. But I always find my marks. Zero exhaled like he'd just stepped into rain. You just won't die, will you? Nope, Shax said, raising his gun. And today, I finished the hunt. Their second fight was faster, dirtier, less graceful. Two killers reduced to pure instinct. Zero took a hit to the shoulder, grunted, countered with a knee that broke something in Shax's ribs. Nora tried to intervene but was pulled back by colonists needing cover. In the end, it was Kellen who finished it. As Shax leveled his gun at Zero one final time, Kellen grabbed a downed guard's pulse rifle and fired. The shot struck Shax square in the chest, sending him back into a collapsing support beam that crushed him with a final crunch. Zero coughed, looked at Kellen. Didn't know you had that in you. I didn't either, Kellen said. They reached the escape shuttles moments later. Nora took the final seat on the last shuttle, watching through the viewport as the dreadnought's deck collapsed behind them. Through a secure line, L3 spoke his last. It's been an honor serving with you. Also, I hacked the conglomerate's treasury. Their emergency fund now buys dog food. Then the dreadnought exploded. From space, it looked like a dying star crying out against the silent sky. The light spread in ripples, and then, slowly, the wreckage drifted into nothing. They returned to Earth 3 weeks later. The colonists were safe, relocated across various systems. The conglomerate fractured under the weight of its own exposed rot. Courts opened investigations. Revolution sparked. Nora gave a single testimony and then disappeared from public view. Kellen stayed behind to help rebuild, working with survivors and former officials trying to restore trust one slow step at a time. Zero vanished. 1 minute he was leaning against the ship's hull, and the next he was gone. No farewells. Just a note scrawled on the back of a ration wrapper left on the console. Don't call unless it's personal. Also, get better pizza. Months later, Nora received a transmission from an unknown relay. A simple message, low-res and grainy. A single image, Zero, lounging under two suns on a beach that didn't exist on any map. Beneath it, the words, "Still alive?" Still cold. Still watching. She smiled. Just a little. The galaxy had burned. But in the ashes, something new waited. And if darkness ever rose again, she knew one thing for certain. She would not be alone.